Harlem, 1965. A kingdom forged in silence and secrets. It was a city hidden within a city, a treacherous labyrinth of brownstones and jazz clubs. High-stakes poker games unfolded in the back rooms of barbershops, while deals were struck in the jagged shadows of the elevated train tracks. To the outside world, it was pure chaos. But to the locals, it was a perfectly tuned machine. And the man holding the lever, the absolute ruler of this domain, was Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. He walked these streets with the heavy stride of a man who owned every inch of pavement beneath his feet. He was the judge, the jury, and the bank, but every king harbors a fatal weakness, a soft underbelly hidden beneath the armor. For Bumpy Johnson, that vulnerability wasn't gold, and it certainly wasn't power. It was his wife, Mamie. Mamie Johnson was the only soul on earth who could stare Bumpy in the eye and tell him he was wrong without fear of his wrath. She had been his anchor during his time in Alcatraz, while he rotted in a cell reeking of sea salt and absolute despair. It was her letters that preserved his sanity. She was the one who managed the books, the one who smoothed the sharp, violent edges of his temper, the one who reminded him he was a man, not just a monster. She was the undisputed queen of Harlem, regal and untouchable, gliding through the gritty streets in silk dresses and pearls, a beacon of class in a world made of hard edges. Bumpy loved her with a ferocity that actually terrified him. He knew that if she were ever taken from him, the last remnant of his humanity would perish, and only the beast would remain. But deep in the shadows of Bumpy's empire, a wolf was circling. Frank Lucas was young, ravenous, and dangerous in a way Bumpy had not yet fully realized. Frank represented a new breed. He didn't care about the community the way Bumpy did. He had no regard for honor or the ancient codes of the street. Frank cared only for efficiency. He worshipped the bottom line. And more than anything else, Frank Lucas despised Mamie Johnson. It wasn't a hatred born of heat or romance. It was cold, calculated business. Frank viewed Mamie as a liability. She possessed far too much influence. She softened Bumpy's blade. She made him cautious when he needed to be aggressive. She read the ledgers. She asked dangerous questions about where the money came from and exactly where it was going. Frank knew that as long as Mamie whispered in Bumpy's ear, he could never fully manipulate the king. She was the gatekeeper, the one person Frank couldn't charm, bribe, or intimidate. She looked at Frank with those sharp, knowing eyes, and he knew she saw right through his mask. She saw the ambition, the greed, the complete lack of a soul, and Frank knew that sooner or later she would convince Bumpy to cut him loose. So Frank decided to strike first. But you don't strike a woman like Mamie Johnson with a bullet. If Mamie died violently, Bumpy would burn New York City to ash just to find the killer. No, Frank knew he had to kill her differently. He had to kill her inside Bumpy's mind. He had to murder the trust, the love, the unshakable bond that held them together. He had to make Bumpy believe the impossible, that his queen was a rat. It began on a rainy Tuesday in November. The sky over Harlem was the color of a bruised plum, and the rain fell in cold, relentless sheets, turning the streets into rivers of oil-slicked asphalt. Frank sat in his car, parked on 116th Street, watching the entrance to the 28th Precinct. He wasn't there to turn himself in. He was there to meet a man named Detective O'Malley, a vice cop with a gambling addiction and a mortgage he couldn't cover. O'Malley was Frank's creature, bought and paid for months ago. The passenger door opened, and O'Malley slid inside, shaking the rain off his fedora. He reeked of wet wool and cheap whiskey. "This better be good, Frank," O'Malley grumbled. "It's too wet to be out here playing spy." "Did you bring it?" Frank asked, ignoring the complaint entirely. He stared straight ahead through the rain-streaked windshield, his face a perfect mask of calm. O'Malley reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a manila folder. It was thin, battered, and stamped with the official seal of the NYPD. "It took me 3 days to forge this right," O'Malley said, handing it over. Paper is from the archives, dated 1963. Typewriter is an old Smith Corona, the same one the precinct clerk uses. The ink is aged. It looks real, Frank. Even the captain wouldn't know the difference. Frank took the folder. He opened it slowly. Inside lay a confidential informant file. The subject, Mamie Johnson. Code name, Lady Day. The file detailed a series of clandestine meetings between Mamie and federal agents. It listed dates, times, and locations. It contained transcripts of conversations where Lady Day provided information on shipments, safe houses, and names. It was a masterpiece of fiction. It painted Mamie not just as a snitch, but as a bitter, trapped woman trading her husband's secrets for immunity and a secret bank account. Frank ran his finger over the typed words and the photos. O'Malley pulled out a grainy black and white photograph. It showed a woman who looked exactly like Mamie. Same coat, same hat, same height, standing on a street corner, talking to a man in a trench coat. It was blurry, taken from a distance, but the resemblance was uncanny. It was actually a cousin of O'Malley's, dressed in clothes Frank had purchased, but in the grain of the photo, it was damning. "Perfect," Frank whispered. A cold smile touched his lips. "This is a work of art, O'Malley. It's a death sentence." O'Malley asked nervously, "If Bumpy finds out I made this, he won't," Frank said, tucking the file into his jacket. "Because by the time he's done reading this, he won't be looking for you. He'll be too busy breaking his own heart." Frank paid O'Malley and watched him scurry back into the rain like a rat. Then he sat there for a moment, letting the weight of what he was about to do settle upon him. He felt absolutely no guilt. In Frank's mind, this was necessary. It was natural selection. The lion was getting old, and the lioness was in the way. It was time for the pride to change management. He started the car and drove toward the Blue Lounge. Bumpy was in his office at the back of the club. The room was warm, smelling of cigar smoke and lemon polish. He was counting stacks of cash, his large hands moving with the rhythmic precision of a well-oiled machine. He looked up when Frank entered. Bumpy's face lit up with a genuine warmth he showed to very few men. He liked Frank. He saw potential in him. He saw a younger version of himself, before time, and the cage dulled his razor edge. "Frank," Bumpy remarked, pointing a finger at the seat across his mahogany slab, "you look like a sewer rat caught in a flood. Fix yourself a stiff one." Frank didn't budge toward the liquor cabinet. He hovered by the entrance, hat clutched tight, rain bleeding onto the expensive rug. He wore the mask of a broken man. He looked like he'd just buried his own brother. His gaze was glued to the floorboards, too coward to meet the boss's stare. "What's the damage?" Bumpy demanded, his tone turning into a blade instantly. The hospitality died, replaced by the coiled instinct of a wolf scenting blood. "Is it the load? Did the families make a move?" "No, boss," Frank murmured soft. "The goods are safe. The streets are quiet. Then spill it. You look terminal." Frank inhaled sharp. He crept to the desk and laid the manila folder atop the towers of bills. He moved delicate, like the file was a loaded trigger. I don't know how to hand this over. I almost torched it. I swear on my mother's grave. Bumpy, I wanted it to be ash." Bumpy eyed the paper. He eyed Frank. "What's the play?" "I got a guy downtown." Frank lied like silk. "A pencil pusher in records. He's in my pocket. He pulled this because of the name on it." Bumpy reached out. His hand hung over the file for a heartbeat. A chill shot through his knuckles, a warning from the gut. He flipped the lid. The first thing to hit him was the name, Mamie Johnson. The second thing to hit him was the tag, confidential informant. The office went dead. The brass horns wailing in the club front died out. The street noise outside vanished into the void. The only noise left in creation was the blood roaring in Bumpy's skull. It roared like the tide. It crashed like the steel gates of Alcatraz slamming home. "This is garbage," Bumpy stated. His tone was level, but it was the quiet of a man in ruin. "It's a setup." "That's what I said." Frank spat quick, stepping in, playing the faithful soldier to a T. I told the rat he was insane. I told him he was a corpse if this leaked. I said Mamie is royalty, she wouldn't dare. Bumpy turned the page. He scanned the first line. October 14th, 1963. Subject sat with Agent Miller at Grand Central. Gave up the safe house on 142nd Street. Bumpy went ice cold. He recalled that date. That was the day the doors got kicked in. 50 keys gone. He'd pinned it on a rat in the ranks. He'd shattered a man's knees for that bust. But Mamie was out spending cash that day. She hit Macy's. He recalled it because she brought him a silk tie. He read on. December 2nd. Subject gave up the plates on the haulers. December 2nd. The trucks got jammed on the Jersey Turnpike. Another hit. Mamie knew the timetable. She penned the logs for him because his script was scratch. Bumpy tasted acid in his throat. The floor seemed to slant. "No," he hissed. "Frank, this is smoke." Someone framed her. "Check the picture, boss," Frank urged, his voice dripping with counterfeit grief. In the rear page, Bumpy slid out the grainy glossy. The dame in the trench, the brim, the stance. It was her spitting image. It was dead on. "I didn't want to buy it," Frank said. "But the calendar, Bumpy, the timeline fits. Every time we bled, she was ghost. Every time cash burned, she saw a dock or hit the shops." I matched the books to her diary. Bumpy slammed the file. The crack was like a pistol shot. "Get lost. Boss, please." I said, "Walk," Bumpy thundered, rising and wiping the cash towers off the wood. Bills floated down like green snow. "You dragged this trash into my sanctuary? You rat on my wife?" "I ain't ratting," Frank shouted back, standing firm. Faking panic. "I'm trying to shield you, Bumpy. Look at me. I respect you like a father. You think I want this nightmare? You think I want to see you broken? But if she turned, if she's snitching, she's sending you to the electric chair. She's burying us all. You gotta know the score." Bumpy stood frozen, chest pumping, eyes manic. He drilled into Frank, hunting for the lie, hunting for the angle. But Frank was a pro. He projected only worry. He projected only duty. "Drop the file," Bumpy whispered, "and vanish. Don't let me see your mug for 24 hours. Frank dipped his head. No smirk. No victory lap. He spun and marched out of the sanctum, latching the door quiet behind him. As he cut through the lounge, past the taps, out into the storm, Frank took one deep lungful. He'd pulled it off. He'd buried the poison. Now he just had to watch it rot the roots. Back in the cage, Bumpy Johnson crumbled into his seat. He glared at the folder. It looked harmless, just pulp and ink. But it was a grenade. It was a nuke resting on his desk. He cracked it open again. He forced his eyes to devour every line. The report was surgical. It quoted talk that sounded like her voice. It used slang she owned. "He's slowing down. He don't trust the rookies." It spilled secrets, his sleepless nights, his gut rot. Things only Mamie held. How could a faker know about the ulcers? How could the bulls know about the nights he woke up screaming, haunted by the solitary? The doubt, which Bumpy tried to strangle when Frank entered, began to bloom like black mold in his chest. It started as a whisper. What if Mamie played the game, sharper than him in plenty of ways? She always despised the blood. She begged him years back to go straight, to grab the stash and run. He shut her down. He told her he was the king, and a king never walks away from the crown. Did she finally snap? Did she decide to save his soul by locking him up? No, Bumpy thought, clawing the chair arms until the leather groaned. Not Mamie. She stood tall for 10 years. She waited. But folks change. A decade is a lifetime. Maybe she got sick of the target on her back. Maybe the feds had leverage. Maybe they squeezed her kin. Bumpy poured a double. His hand trembled, betraying the stone-cold composure he was famous for. The whiskey burned going down, but it settled like ash in his gut. He needed to look her in the eyes, but he wasn't ready to face the music in his own sanctuary. If he walked through that front door with this venom coursing through his blood, there was no telling what he would do. He might break her, and the mere idea of laying a hand on Mamie made him want to taste the cold steel of his own barrel. For 6 agonizing hours, he tore his office apart like a madman looking for a cure. He ripped open his private ledgers. He lined up every damn date in that Fed file against his own black book. He worked with the desperate obsession of a man praying to be proven a fool. Date, August 4th. The shipment seizure that cost him a fortune. Mamie's alibi. The hairdresser. Bumpy made the call, pitching his voice low and unrecognizable. Did Mrs. Johnson make her appointment on August 4th? The receptionist checked the book. No, sir. A cancellation. The phone slipped from Bumpy's grip like a dead weight. The receiver swung by its cord, a pendulum counting down his life. Cancelled. She had looked him in the eye and said she went. She walked through his door with her hair perfect. Maybe she fixed it herself to sell the lie. Or maybe she was sitting across from Agent Miller. The evidence was circumstantial, sure, but it was stacking up like bricks in a wall closing him in. Then there was the messenger. Frank Lucas, his right hand, the man he groomed from nothing, had delivered the death sentence. Frank had zero motive to play games. Frank was made in Bumpy's image. If the boss falls, the underboss gets buried right next to him. Framing the Queen was suicide unless Frank was holding the absolute, undeniable truth. By the time the sun bled over the Harlem skyline, turning the gray rain into a suffocating mist, Bumpy Johnson was a man reduced to rubble. He sat, slumped in his throne, the empty bottle at his feet, the file spread out like a blueprint of his own demise. The years crashed down on him all at once. He felt the heavy burden of every single one of his 50-odd years. He knew the laws of the street. If this was a runner, a corner boy, or a captain, their ticket would already be punched. They would be wrapped up in a trunk, taking a one-way ride to the Jersey marshes. The rule was ironclad. Death to all rats. No exceptions. But this was Mamie. This was the woman who held his heart in her hands. He rose from the darkness. He slid the file into his coat pocket. He checked the chamber of his pistol, a snub-nose .38 special, the piece he kept for up-close and personal business. He slid it into the holster. But today, the steel felt heavier than it ever had before. It felt like he was dragging his own tombstone. He stepped out of the club and into the unforgiving light. The morning air bit at his skin. He walked the 10 blocks to his brownstone. No car, no driver. He needed to walk the pavement. He needed to survey his empire one last time before it crumbled to dust. The soldiers on the corner dipped their heads in respect. The church ladies smiled on their way to early mass. Good morning, Mr. Johnson. They had no idea. They didn't know their king was marching toward his own execution. Not a bullet to the head, but the slaughter of his soul. He reached the steps of his fortress. The warm glow of the kitchen lights spilled out. Mamie was awake. She always rose with the sun, brewing coffee and reading the news before the city stirred. Bumpy stood frozen on the concrete for an eternity. He gazed up at the window, watching her shadow move behind the sheer curtains. She looked so peaceful, so innocent. Please, Bumpy begged a god he hadn't spoken to since he was a boy, let this be a lie. Let me be the crazy one. Let Frank be wrong. I will burn the empire down. I will walk away from the life forever. Just don't let her be a rat. But the file scorched his chest like a brand. The dates, the lie, the photo. He climbed the steps. He turned the key in the lock. The air inside was thick with the scent of fresh coffee and bacon. It smelled like safety. It was the scent that fueled him through his darkest wars. Now, it smelled like a snare. Mamie stood by the stove, the queen of his castle. She wore a silk robe, hair wrapped perfectly in a scarf. She turned at the sound of the latch, her face lit up with that $1,000,000 smile, that radiant light that had pulled him from the abyss 1,000 times. Ellsworth, she called him, the name only she used. You are home early, baby. I am just starting breakfast. You hungry? Bumpy remained a statue in the doorway. He stared at her. He studied the woman he had worshipped since the first second they met. He searched her face for the treachery. He hunted for guilt in her eyes, but he found only adoration, and that terrified him more than a loaded gun. Because if she could look at him with that much love, while serving him up to the feds on a platter, then she was the coldest monster in New York, and he was the biggest mark in the game. "Ellsworth?" Mamie asked, the light dying in her eyes. She felt the temperature drop in the room. She sensed the violent storm he had dragged in from the street. She killed the flame on the stove. "What is the matter? You look like you have seen a ghost." Bumpy gave no reply. He marched into the kitchen. He ripped the manila folder from his coat and slammed it onto the table. It landed between the breakfast plate and the coffee cup. "Sit down, Mamie," Bumpy commanded. His voice was gravel, like stones grinding in a mixer. Mamie glanced at the folder, then back at the man she married. She saw the devastation in his gaze, a deep, bottomless hell that shook her to her bones. She didn't dare ask why. She undid her apron and sank into the chair. "What is all this?" she asked, keeping her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Read it," Bumpy ordered. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her like an interrogator. He clasped his hands on the table, locking them tight to keep the violence contained. Mamie flipped the folder open. Her own name stared back at her, then the stamp, "Confidential Informant." She looked up at Bumpy, eyes wide with horror. "Ellsworth? What kind of joke is this?" "Read it," Bumpy repeated, cold as ice. Every word. Mamie began to read. With every page turn, the color drained from her face. She gasped when she saw the dates. She shook her head, scanning the transcripts. I never said any of this," she whispered. "I don't know who this Agent Miller is. I have never set foot in the 28th Precinct." "The dates, Mamie," Bumpy cut in. "Look at the damn dates. August 4th, the shipment raid. You canceled your hair appointment that afternoon. Where were you really?" Mamie looked up, desperate. I wasn't feeling well. I stayed in. The shop said you canceled. You weren't here when I rang the house." "I went for a walk," Mamie cried out. "I went to the park to clear my head. Ellsworth, you know my heart. You know I would never." "Do I?" Bumpy asked. "Do I really know you? Because this paper says I don't know you at all. It says you have been selling my blood for 2 years. It says you are the reason the heroin is gone. You're saying I broke Tommy's legs? That's a damn lie." Mamie stood up, the chair screeching against the floor like a dying animal. "Who fed you this garbage? Who wants us dead? It doesn't matter who the rat is," Bumpy said, his voice dropping to a graveyard whisper. "It only matters if the intel is solid. If it's true." Mamie seized his hands across the mahogany table. Her skin burned with intensity. "Ellsworth, look me in the eye. Look at my soul. Do you really believe I'm a traitor? After Alcatraz? After the hell we survived?" I waited. "I built this empire of silence with you." Bumpy's voice cracked. "That's why the knife twists so deep. A single tear, heavy with grief, cut a path down his scarred face. That is why I want to put a bullet in my own head, Mamie. If the world comes for me, I war. If the feds come, I stand tall. But if my own house turns on me, I have nothing. I am a dead man walking." "I am not your enemy," Mamie sobbed. "I belong to you. The person who handed you this file is the one holding the dagger." Bumpy pulled his hands away. Cold, detached. He reached into his coat and drew the photo, the grainy surveillance image of the woman on the corner. He slapped it onto the wood. "Explain this," Bumpy commanded. Mamie studied the image. Her eyes narrowed. "That coat. It mimics mine. But that is not me, Ellsworth. Look at the footwear. I don't touch trash like that. Those are corner store heels. I only wear Ferragamo." Bumpy studied the grain. The shoes were blurry, but the scuff marks screamed poverty. Cheap. Broken in. Mamie wouldn't be caught dead in scuffed leather. A tiny spark of doubt lit a match in Bumpy's dark heart. "But the intel, the ulcers," Bumpy pressed. How did they know about my stomach condition? The file details my nightmares, my weakness. Only you hold those secrets. Mamie froze. The silence stretched tight. I spoke to Pastor Williams, she confessed softly. I asked for prayers. I told him you couldn't sleep. I told him the pain was eating you alive. Williams? Bumpy's brow furrowed. You spilled family business to a preacher? I was terrified for you, Mamie cried out. I needed spiritual counsel. I kept the business out of it, just your health. Bumpy leaned back. Pastor Williams, the man preached at Abyssinian Baptist. A holy man, sure, but he had a loose tongue. And his brother carried a badge. The puzzle pieces began to click into a twisted picture. The image wasn't sharp yet, but the absolute conviction of Mamie's guilt shattered. He looked at his queen. She wasn't cowering like a cornered rat. She stood like a soldier, defending her post. She was fighting for him. But Frank had been so certain. Frank acted like his heart was broken. Frank gave this to you, didn't he? Mamie asked suddenly. Her voice shifted. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, razor-sharp rage. Bumpy watched the transformation. Why name him? Because he despises me, Mamie declared. She wiped her face, posture rigid. He hates that I see through him. I see the animal inside. He's a wolf, Ellsworth, and I'm the gatekeeper blocking his path to your throne. Frank is loyal, Bumpy recited automatically. He's a son. He's not a son, Mamie snapped. He's a parasite. He covets your crown. And he knows he can't usurp you while I'm guarding your back. So I have to go. She snatched up the file. Look at the stamp. It's a forgery, Ellsworth. High quality, but fake. Frank bought a dirty cop. Why now? Just as he pushes for expansion, this poison appears? Bumpy rubbed his temples. A migraine hammered behind his eyes. His heart screamed to trust her. His brain, forged in betrayal, demanded proof. I need absolute certainty, Bumpy said, rising like a looming shadow. I can't operate on faith, Mamie. Doubt is a cancer, and if I hesitate, we die. Then turn this city upside down, Mamie challenged. She marched to him, gripping his lapels, the same way he had gripped the doctor weeks prior. Tear Harlem apart, check the dates, squeeze the pastor, hunt down that woman in the photo, do what must be done. But do not surrender me to him. Do not let the wolf win. Bumpy looked down. He saw the iron in her soul, the same fire that kept him sane in the solitary dark. And if you're playing me, Bumpy whispered dangerously, if this is real, Mamie held his gaze. Then you pull the trigger yourself, Ellsworth, because a life without your respect is a grave I'm willing to lie in. Silence descended. The rain ceased, leaving a dripping rhythm outside. Bumpy Johnson stood in his kitchen, the gun heavy against his hip. His wife stood before him, betting her life on the truth. He inhaled deeply. The decision was made. I'll find the facts, Bumpy vowed. And may God have mercy on the liar, because I won't. He turned on his heel. No kiss, no softness, not yet. He stepped into the gray morning, but he wasn't walking to a funeral anymore. He was marching to war. He found a payphone. He dialed. Not Frank, not the crew. He called Goldie, a ghost from his past, ex-Army intelligence, a man who owed Bumpy his blood. Goldie, Bumpy stated, I have work. I need you to hunt a phantom, and silence is paramount. If a whisper gets out, even to my lieutenants, especially them, you're dead. I'm a grave, Goldie replied. I'm coming, Bumpy said. I have documents. Trace the typewriter, ID the photographer, and I need Frank Lucas's location for Tuesday night. Bumpy slammed the receiver down. He lingered, hand on the cold metal. He glanced back at his fortress. Mamie was a silhouette in the window. He couldn't see her face, but he felt the weight of her gaze. He had demanded truth, and she had thrown down the gauntlet. Now, the godfather of Harlem had a new mission, to hunt his own shadow. As Bumpy departed, Frank Lucas sat in a sedan 3 blocks away. He lowered the binoculars, a shark-like grin spreading. He saw the distance, the lack of intimacy. It's taking root, Frank whispered to the air. He didn't whack her yet, but he's shattered, and a broken king is easy to dethrone. Easy prey. Frank gunned the engine and peeled out, already writing the obituary for the Queen of Harlem. But Frank? He made one fatal error. He underestimated the blood pact between the lion and the lioness. He thought he broke them? Wrong. He just woke the beasts. The hunt had begun. And within 24 hours, someone was going to bleed out. Goldie's office sat above a deli on 135th. The air reeked of pastrami, stale smoke, and old dust. Bumpy Johnson sat there, a mountain of silence in a groaning chair, watching the little man work. Goldie, small guy, thick glasses, fingers yellow from the smokes. But inside that head, a mind like a steel trap. The file was splayed out under the harsh lamp. Goldie studied the paper fibers like a jeweler grading a diamond. Silence, just the clock, ticking away time, and the heavy breathing of 2 men. They knew the answer to this puzzle meant life or a funeral. Bumpy was a statue. No movement, no smoke, face like carved stone. But inside, his gut was twisting into cold iron knots. Every tick was a betrayal. Every passing second was spit on the vows he took. Finally, Goldie leaned back, rubbed his eyes, sparked a match. He looked at the boss. And for the first time in hours, the investigator cracked a smile, not a happy smile. The grim grin of a man who found the crack in the armor. "It's a fugazi, Bumpy." His voice was gravel. Bumpy exhaled, felt like he'd been holding his breath since sunrise. The room suddenly felt lighter. "Talk," he commanded. "Give it to me straight." Goldie lifted a sheet. "Paper is real. NYPD stock. Vintage, 63. Watermark checks out. That's authentic. But the ink?" Goldie tapped the page. "Fresh. They tried to cook it under a lamp. Age it up. See the yellow edges? Amateur hour. Under the glass, the ink sits on top. Didn't soak in. It ain't 2 years old. This was typed yesterday. Maybe today." Bumpy nodded slowly. "Ice cold. Keep going. The machine? Smith Corona Sterling. See the E. It sits high. Distinct defect. I know the clerk at the 2-8. His machine has a sticky A. This wasn't typed at the precinct. This was done private. And the picture?" Bumpy's voice was low, pointing at the grainy figure on the corner. Goldie grabbed the photo. "Ah, the masterpiece. High-grain film to hide the face. But they blew the lighting. Look at the shadows." Goldie pointed with his pen. "Her shadow falls left. Street lamp shadow falls right. It's a paste-up job. Fake light. And the shoes?" Goldie squinted. "You called it. Dime store trash. Heel is too thick. Mame wears Italian steel. She could kill a man with her heel. These? Dull as dirt. Relief hit Bumpy like a shot of whiskey. Then came the fire. Pure, molten rage in his veins. Mamie was clean. She was innocent. He almost torched his kingdom over a piece of paper and a lie. Bumpy opened his eyes. The demon was back. Who? The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "I made calls," Goldie said. "File says Detective Miller. No Miller in Vice. But there is an O'Malley in archives. Gambler. In deep with the Italians. Word on the street, he got paid Tuesday. Cleared his debt. O'Malley." Bumpy tasted the name. He filed it away in the graveyard of his mind. "And the intel? The nightmares? The stomach pain?" "That's the hard part," Goldie muttered. "That's inside info. Someone close. Someone she talks to." Bumpy stood up. The chair scraped. "The preacher," he said. "She told the preacher. Pastor Williams?" Goldie paused. "He's a man of God, Bumpy. He's just a man," Bumpy corrected. "And his brother's a beat cop." Cash hit the desk. burn the file. I keep the picture." Bumpy turned to leave. "Bumpy," Goldie warned, "you touch O'Malley, you bring the heat. You touch the pastor, the neighborhood turns on you. Whoever set this up, they want you wild, reckless. They want a mistake." Bumpy stopped at the door, turned back. "I ain't gonna be reckless, Goldie. I'm gonna be surgical." He stepped into the afternoon sun. The city looked different. No more prison bars. Now, it was a hunting ground. Bumpy drove to Abyssinian. He didn't kick the door in. He waited. Let the old ladies in hats clear out first. He walked in. Empty sanctuary. Steps booming on the wood like a gavel. Pastor Williams was at the altar, snuffing candles. He turned. The pastor was a good man? Maybe, but he was soft, loved the robes, feared the streets. He saw Bumpy Johnson walking down the aisle. The blood left his face. "Pure fear, Mr. Johnson," the pastor stuttered. "To what do I owe the 'we haven't seen you in'?" "A while? I ain't here to pray, Pastor," Bumpy said. Stopped at the rail. "I'm here to confess, or maybe hear one. I don't understand." The pastor shook. The candle snuffer rattled in his grip. "My wife," Bumpy whispered. "Dangerous. She talks to you, trusts you, told you about my gut, my dreams. She was worried. Ellsworth," the pastor pleaded. "She asked for prayer. That's between her and the big man." "Who else?" Bumpy stepped through the gate. "Who else did you tell, Pastor? Your brother with the badge?" The pastor's eyes flickered to the side. A twitch. The tell. Guilt written in neon. I might have mentioned it. My brother asked how you were holding up. I was just concerned about the streets, Ellsworth. Just harmless talk. I swear it on my mother." Bumpy drilled holes through the man with his eyes. He bought the lie. The preacher was a loose cannon, not a traitor. He spilled the secrets, unaware they were arsenic. Then, his brother in blue handed that loaded gun right to O'Malley. And who did O'Malley hand it to? "Watch who you pray to, Reverend," Bumpy murmured, his voice rumbling like a distant thunderstorm. "The Lord hears you, but the devil is always listening." Bumpy turned on his heel, leaving the holy man trembling in the shadow of the cross. The circle was closed. Mamie spoke to the priest to his blood, the blood to O'Malley. Then O'Malley cooked the books. But who bankrolled O'Malley? Who had the hunger and the reach to orchestrate this symphony? Goldie confirmed O'Malley cleared his debts on Tuesday. The exact day Frank Lucas walked into the office clutching that damned folder. Frank found the dirt. Frank circled the dates. Frank was the one whispering that Mamie was a rope around the boss's neck. All roads led to Frank. Yet Bumpy paused. Frank was his enforcer. Frank was the heir to the kingdom. Taking Frank out was like severing his own limb. And Bumpy was a man who required ironclad certainty. He had the method and the name, but he needed the motive to be chained to Frank beyond a shadow of a doubt. O'Malley was a ghost, dead or vanished if he had half a brain. The preacher was blind to the game. Bumpy steered the car toward home. The sun dipped low, painting Harlem in shades of dried blood. A heavy weariness sank into his marrow. It wasn't about the body. It was the soul-crushing weight of knowing the crown isolates the king. He turned the key to his fortress. Silence greeted him. The kitchen remained frozen in time. 2 cold cups of coffee sat untouched on the mahogany. Mamie sat in the living room, swallowed by darkness. No bags packed, just waiting for the gavel to fall. Bumpy stepped into the gloom. He left the lights off, watching his wife's outline in the dimness. Mamie. She rose slowly, no questions asked. She simply stood her ground. Bumpy crossed the floorboards. As he closed the gap, her fragrance hit him, that unique mix of lavender and iron. He dropped to his knees. Bumpy Johnson, the monster who made tough guys soil their trousers, the survivor of Alcatraz and hell on earth, knelt on his own carpet and embraced his wife's waist. He hid his face in her silk folds. "Forgive me," he choked out, his voice cracking. "I am so sorry, Mamie." Mamie didn't flinch. No screaming, no rage. She laid her hands on him, fingers drifting through his hair. She cradled him. "It was false?" she asked quietly. "A lie," Bumpy wept. "A fabrication. The priest, the forger. I tracked it all. You spoke the truth. I never should have questioned your loyalty. I should have put a bullet in the messenger instantly." "Hush now," Mamie whispered, swaying him gently. "You are a king, Ellsworth. Kings have rivals. They strike at the chinks in the armor. They assumed I was your Achilles' heel. They forgot that I am your backbone." They remained locked together in the silence. Outside, the lamps buzzed to life, throwing prison bars of light across the hardwood. Bumpy finally rose. He wiped his eyes. The weakness evaporated, replaced by cold, granite resolve. "Frank," Bumpy stated. It was him. Mamie didn't ask. She knew. "He delivered the file," Bumpy said. "Played the grieving son. Claimed he verified the timeline. Claimed he was shielding me." "He wants your throne," Mamie countered. "He can't manipulate you while I breathe. He needed me dead or exiled. Then you'd be isolated. And an isolated king trusts the wolf at the gate." "I'll end him," Bumpy vowed. "I'm heading to the Blue Lounge tonight. I'll paint the walls with his brains in public." "No," Mamie snapped, gripping his forearm. "No, Ellsworth." Bumpy stared, perplexed. "He framed you. He tried to trick me into murdering my wife. He dies. Kill him tonight," Mamie said, eyes burning in the dark. "And you look frail. You look like a man jumping at shadows. You lack the chain linking Frank to O'Malley. Frank is sharp. He wore gloves. Execute your captain without cause, and you spark a civil war. The soldiers idolize Frank. They'll call you senile, paranoid. So I sit on my hands?" Bumpy snarled. "I let him slide?" "No," Mamie replied. "You let him breathe for now. Keep him close. Exploit him. He earns. He keeps the other families at bay. But trust is dead. You dismantle him piece by piece. Make him question if you know. Let him suffer in the heat." "I can't face him," Bumpy admitted. "I see a traitor trying to bury us." "You will," Mamie commanded, "because you are the godfather of Harlem. You will stare him down and smile. Let him believe he won. That is the torture, Ellsworth. He believes he's the genius. Let him. And when he slips, just once, we crush him flat." Bumpy gazed at his queen. He was in awe. She was colder than ice. She was playing chess. "Fine," Bumpy agreed. "We play your game." An hour later, Bumpy entered the Blue Lounge. The joint was jumping. Smoke drifted like blue spirits. The sax wailed a funeral dirge. Frank Lucas sat at the bar, nursing a drink he hadn't touched. He was wired tight, eyes on the clock, waiting for the call, waiting to hear Mamie was history. When Bumpy stepped inside, the atmosphere cracked. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Frank swiveled on his stool. He scanned Bumpy's expression. Stone cold, Frank rose, walking toward the boss, wearing a mask of brotherly worry. "Bumpy," he started, voice tight. "Where you been? I was worried sick. Did you take care of business?" Bumpy stopped cold. He locked eyes with Frank. He drilled deep into the younger man's gaze, searching for a soul he once believed existed. He saw nothing, just a vast, starving emptiness. "It's handled," Bumpy stated. Frank's shoulders dropped, the tension leaving his body. A smirk of victory tried to tug at his lips before he killed it. "I'm sorry, Bumpy. I know how heavy that weighs on you, but you made the right call. She was a liability. We're better off without her." "It was a setup," Bumpy said. The silence that hit the room was heavier than lead, drowning out the music. Frank turned to stone. The relief evaporated, replaced by the cold sweat of a dead man walking. It lasted a second before his survival instincts roared to life. A setup?" Frank stammered. "What are you saying?" "The evidence," Bumpy said, his voice flat as granite, Forgery. O'Malley and records faked it. Someone paid him to plant the lie. Mamie is innocent. Frank's brain spun out. He ran the numbers on his survival. He measured the distance to the exit. "Oh, thank the Lord," Frank exhaled, grabbing Bumpy's hand, shaking it like a lifeline. Bumpy, that is. That is the best news I ever heard. I was sick over it. Physically sick. I thought, oh man, if I had been wrong, you times were times wrong, Frank, Bumpy cut in. He didn't return the handshake. He just let Frank's hand hang there in the dead air. Who? Frank demanded, eyes popping with fake fury. Who planted it? Give me a name, Bumpy. I'll bury them myself. I'll tear them apart for coming at your family. Anonymous tip, Bumpy lied. He watched the prey squirm. O'Malley got a call. Envelope of cash in his box. No name, just orders. Rival crew. Frank nodded too fast. Has to be. Maybe the Genovese family. They wanted chaos. They wanted to turn the king against his own house. Those dirty rats. Yeah, Bumpy said. Chaos. Well, the important thing is you caught it, Frank said, wiping cold sweat from his brow. You didn't do anything reckless, right? No, Bumpy replied. I did my homework, like a careful man. Good, Frank breathed. That's why you're the king, Bumpy. Smarter than them. Smarter than all of us. Go back to your drink, Frank, Bumpy ordered. Big day tomorrow, Frank nodded. He patted Bumpy on the shoulder a Judas kiss, and retreated to the bar. Bumpy watched him walk away. He saw the slight tremor in Frank's hand as he reached for the glass. Frank knew. Frank knew the boss suspected something, but Frank also knew, without hard proof, he was still breathing. It was a stalemate. A Cold War had been declared in the heart of the Harlem mob. Bumpy stepped into his office and sealed the door. He took the chair behind the big desk. He produced the photo of the woman on the corner, the last scrap of the file he kept. He struck a match. He held the flame to the edge. He watched the traitor's fabrication curl into black ash. He had saved his marriage. He had saved his queen. But he had lost a son. The Frank Lucas he thought he knew was in the ground. In his place sat a viper, coiled in the tall grass, waiting for the next strike. The next evening, the Renaissance ballroom hosted the gala. Bumpy and Mamie arrived. They entered arm in arm, united, unbreakable, more powerful than ever before. Mamie stunned in a gown of midnight blue silk, her Ferragamo heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the marble, head high. A smile for the public. Playing the role of the perfect hostess, Frank Lucas was there, holding court by the buffet with the young hustlers, laughing, telling war stories, basking in the glow of his own ambition. Mamie stopped cold. Her grip tightened on Bumpy's arm like a vice. She looked across the floor at Frank. Frank looked up. He met her eyes. He expected fear. He expected a broken woman who barely survived. He expected relief. He found none of it. Mamie Johnson looked at him with eyes that were ice, cold, clear, and absolutely lethal. No smile, no frown. She stared at him the way a hawk stares at a field mouse from the heavens. She tilted her chin up. A millimeter of absolute dominance. Asterisk, I know. Asterisk, her eyes said. Asterisk, I know what you did. Asterisk, asterisk, I know what you are. And I am watching. Asterisk, Frank's smile died. He buried his nose in his drink, looking away. A chill crawled down his spine. He realized then he had made a fatal miscalculation. He thought Bumpy was the danger. He thought the king was the one to outmaneuver. But standing under the weight of Mamie's gaze, the truth hit Frank like a brick. Bumpy might be the king, but Mamie, she was the guardian of the gate. He hadn't just failed to kill her. He had forged her into steel. He sharpened her claws. Bumpy leaned in close. You good, baby? Mame didn't blink. I'm fine, Ellsworth, she whispered, voice sharp. Just counting the silverware. Let's dance, Bumpy commanded. He swept her onto the floor. The band struck up a waltz. Bumpy and Mamie moved as one, a single entity spinning in the spotlight, invincible. the beating heart of Harlem. And in the shadows, Frank Lucas nursed his bitter drink. He knew his time was coming, but he also knew the eyes of the Queen would never close, never sleep, and never forgive. He aimed for the heart and missed. And in Bumpy Johnson's world, you don't get a second shot at the Queen. The music swelled. Bumpy pulled her close. "I love you," he said. "I know," Mamie replied. "Now keep your eyes on the door, Ellsworth. I'll watch the snake." They danced on, spinning through the dangerous, beautiful night. Two lions in a jungle of jackals, bound by blood, by secrets, and by the truth that almost destroyed them. The file was ash. The lie was dead. But the war had just begun. The real war was only just beginning. I appreciate your time. If you respect the business, show your loyalty, leave a like, and join the crew. That way, you won't miss a move from Bumpy Johnson.